Hello, welcome to Animal Audit Corner. Today we have a real heartbreaking story between what goes on in the world today and yesterday. Around the 20 with the Armenian concentration camps. There was between 600,400 and 1.2 million Armenians executed in a murder concentration camp. Ottoman Enterprise Committee, who was well known for being infamous for being heinous acts in that empire. The Young Turks was formed by the Ottoman Empire around 1889 by huge groups of intellects and the military. They all were seeking to modernize an entire empire when that whole episode would be known to be etched in history as being the most notorious during the time of the genocide in 1950. My grandmother was born back then. The Armenian Genocide was in Turkey, which is in the Middle East. But the Scientology concentration camp, which is called the Hole, this is called the Rehabilitation Project. This would be the most notorious aspect in the Sea Org prison. Concentration camp in Scientology would have those rehabilitation projects for us all over the world. The Rehabilitation Project Force concentration camp was created by L. Ron Hubbard himself in We do not need another concentration camp in the world and in the United States. A concentration camp here is the last thing you want to expect, that we don't expect at all. We would figure that it happens in other countries, in the Middle East and in Turkey, but never in the United States. The purpose of the concentration camp is to retain people that is considered to be undesirable. This would be forced labor for economic purposes through the means of exploitation. What they are doing in Scientology, they would use slave labor and only give them $47 a week, which is not much to live off of, especially with today's economy. But with the Armenians, they would be targeted for death through these concentration camps. So these concentration camps would just operate so differently in life. From yesterday and into today. The Young Turks started to gain political power in 1908, which brought about Ottoman Empire. That would be the Ottoman Empire, along with the Young Turks, would initially wanted to promote equality for reform for every ethnic group. Then tension would rise with all the Armenian nationalists gave their statement and advocate for rights within the community. Then around 1915, during the World War I, all the Armenians were forcibly removed from their homes, and they were all sent to live in a concentration camp and was executed one by one. Scientology started to gain more power through safe pointing in the early 1980s through political. When contributions to a politician during an election by making a donation to politicians. This is the way Scientology would operate. Then would have a community barbecue so they can make allies with everyone. Then when everyone is not looking, when everybody's looking the other way, they would control a concentration camp within Los Angeles and in Clearwater. In Los Angeles, it would be in the blue buildings with people shoved in one room with 6 bunk beds that would stack up where they would work and live. So no one would know that they have those concentration camps, that they have everyone working. So they won't know that they are working slave wages. And they come up with every excuse. Then, nevertheless, the Ottoman Empire and Scientology had their concentration camps in 2 different times and operate differently. Then ultimately, Ottoman Empire committee, who was well known for being the committee country of Turkey, of that empire. Now, we all know that the Armenian Genocide was in Turkey, which is in the middle. But the Scientology concentration camp, which is called the Hole. This is called, which would be referred to as the Rehabilitation Project, which would be their concentration camp, which would be the Hole, that would work people into slave labor, which would be forced labor for economic purposes through the means of exploitations. And this is what they are doing in Scientology. They would use slave labor and only give people who are working slave labor slave wages, which is not very much to live off of, which is $47, which is not enough to live on. It's live on today. Now, even people who work at a burger joint would get more than that. The Ottoman Empire, along with the Young Turks, would initially wanted to promote equality for reform. For every, what did this ethnic reform bring? The execution of 1.2 million Armenians. Scientology started gaining more power through safe-pointing in the early 1980s through political means. Then, in conclusion, both Ottoman Empire and Scientology would have concentration camps in two different times and places. And that's how things like this go on in the world today. In my statement, when I did my research on this topic, and Nora mentioned that she was placed in a concentration camp, Nora Ames, a former Scientologist who was placed there when somehow she was put there as a child. Now, how do we define a concentration camp? A concentration camp is a place that has bad working conditions and is working without proper equipment and is not wearing any kind of protection to keep them from getting sick. But in Turkey, they would use a concentration and they would use it in means of murder. And this is their idea of reform. Now, you never expect a concentration camp or places like or organizations like Scientology, who claims to be a religion, would exploit people through slave labor. And all the movie stars, well, some of them, not all of them, and some of the musicians, some, not all, are using people for slave labor. And everybody who's a movie star is being looked up to from everyday people. They look up to movie stars. Do they think because they're movie stars, they're nice people? Well, no, it's the work that they do that impresses us. In everyday life, we see every single organization out there in the world. Do they always operate accurately? No. And this is what we learn today in everyday life. But how do we defy another person? Now, in the Middle East, there are poor people that live in poor conditions and live in dangerous areas. And 90 to 95% of the times, they live in dangerous neighborhoods. But are there concentration camps there in Turkey today? It's possible. Now, Turkey is good at making allies. But also my ancestors were executed in the Armenian Genocide. And my grandmother was born in 1915 and survived that day. And then my mother was born. And of course, then she got married. And then my brother came along. But my dad lived a different kind of life because his childhood was cut short when his father died. Now, he told me that his father got put in a concentration camp. Was it still around when he was a kid? Well, according to him, it was. But were they working in secret? Or did they do it behind other people's backs in that country? So my grandmother, his mother, after when my father was pulled out of school at the age of 12, just like Aaron Smith Levin was when he got pulled out of school to work. But you never expect it to happen here in this country. Never. But I guess it does, because look at Scientology. They have slave laborers in the rehabilitation workforce, which turns out to be a concentration camp, according to Nora. And is she right? Yes, because a concentration camp is a place with poor working conditions and live in poor conditions. That's what a concentration camp is. So my father was working at the age of 12 like Aaron Smith Levin was. And then one day my grandmother actually married off his older sister. And this is right in Turkey, in the Middle East. Were they operating right after the Armenian Genocide and after World War I? Well, it's possible, because you don't know what Turkey is up to. They know how to make allies back and forth. So what do you think? I know I'm still learning the kinks of this thing, but tell me what you think. Hit me at my email until I learn how to figure out the whole chat. Oh, darn it. So, tell me what you think. Just hit me up on my email in the compound word NisaTarosian2 at gmail.com. NisaTarosian2, Nisa and then Tarosian, Nisa and then Torosian 2 at gmail.com. Now, how do you define a character to be? Now, can you always tell what another person's up to, especially in Scientology? So, hit the like, press subscribe, and as soon as I figure out how to use this chat, I'll see you then. God bless.